Welcome back, you rodent rockers, to another installment of Retrospective, where I do the history of the band Ratt. I'd like to say thank you to all the people that have been watching these. You guys are really awesome, and thanks for all your comments, and keep them coming. And also a very special thanks to my guy, Ratmaster86. So with Dancing Undercover, we have a kind of a sleazy, bluesy, thrashy, metally, just overall kick-ass album that I'm really excited to start talking about here. And this is what I like to call the third part in the Ratt trilogy. So without further ado, let's rat and roll. After the successful tour with Bon Jovi, Ratt were ready to come home and relax and unwind. But the record label had different ideas for them with that. The band really wasn't ready to record yet, and they really were just feeling totally burned out on top of all the drinking and the drug use, but it didn't matter to the label, and before they could even really recharge their batteries, there was already a $50,000 deposit put down at the Village Recorder so that the band could just jump right back into the studio without even having any material written for this. The deposit was non-refundable, so the band was under even more pressure to get this album done. And with time constraints, it left them with no chance to experiment with their sound, try to evolve it, change it. It was pretty much just a do what we want you to do, put out a hit, put out another hit, maybe fit in a ballad, but we need you to get this album done. The band was also dealing with a lot of burnout, specifically Steven and Robin, but Robin most especially. He was getting deeper into cocaine, deeper into heroin use, and when he and Nikki Sixx would get together, the drug use was very rampant. Robin was buying a lot of junk, like tons of guitars, motorcycles, cars. He was keeping this all at his house, which he really was barely at anyways, and later on in life he had mentioned that he really had no use for these things. It was almost as though he was filling the void with possessions because he was so lonely all the time. Not to mention the expectations of being rich and famous. You own lots of things and live lavishly. In between recording, Steven and Robin mostly would go out partying. Juan, Warren, and Bobby had girlfriends and wives, so they weren't as much involved in that as the other two were, especially Robin, as stated. And they sometimes would stay at this hotel that they would just rent out for weeks on end, and they would party there a lot of mischief went on there. But they also ran into a lot of crazy celebrities out on the strip. And eventually Robin even suggested, hey, maybe we should start doing some other things. Maybe we should start going on hikes, being more active, maybe party less. But of course this was not something that happened. Some habits just die really hard, and this was one of them. Plus, during the 80s, these kind of bands were really treated like this was the norm, and a lot of the labels and the people that the labels were surrounding them with definitely encouraged a lot of this excess. It was just kind of the way it was. MTV showed it like everything was a big party. Everything was always just, let's get drunk, let's do drugs, let's just keep this party going. It's just sex, drugs, rock and roll, and this band lived up to that phrase probably more than many in the 80s, other than Motley Crue. Back in the studio, there's a lot of bickering and infighting. And everybody wants to put their own mark on the album. They want their songs featured on this. Everybody's writing music for it. According to Robin, there's at least 3 half-assed songs, in his opinion, on this. One being Take a Chance. And he said that 7th Avenue, to him, had potential but just didn't meet the mark. At this point, Robin's smoking heroin, and he relinquished his unspoken leader role in this, and he said that they just kind of looked up to Robin. They always came to him for the final word, like, what do you think, A or nay? Is this good? How do you like it? He said he wasn't the oldest member in the band, but he felt that they kind of looked up to him because he was the most mature one of all of them. They had a lot of goofiness going on, whereas he liked to take his music seriously, and the writing process very serious. With his drug problems, some days he couldn't perform as well on guitar parts, and it was Warren that would have to take over. And this definitely was hurting Robin's self-esteem. This was making him feel almost like, wow, I'm really starting to be demoted. And I don't think that was what they were trying to do, but when you're involved in the amount of drugs and alcohol and stardom, and you start to feel your presence kind of slip, that's when things just get worse. Also, Robin mentioned that Warren was starting to kind of resent Robin a bit due to the fact that it was always Steven and Robin on the front covers of magazines. They were always getting the interviews, whereas Warren was starting to emerge as the guitar master of the band, but not really getting any press. But according to Robin as well, it had a lot to do with Warren's personality. He was still really quiet. He didn't really give good interviews. And Robin just had that charisma. Even if he was dealing with his addictions, he held his own in interviews, and he could really, steal the show with these things. The fact of the matter is, it wasn't Robin's fault that this was happening. Interviewers, magazines, radio shows, they wanted to talk to Robin. They sought after Robin because he was a good talker. He had that charisma. And when they would have him on these different interviews and stuff, it wasn't always just about Ratt. It was like personal questions. And this actually really made the rest of the band kind of annoyed. They would say to him different things like, why'd you talk about that stuff? What does that have to do with Ratt? And, he was only answering the questions that he was being asked. So this caused extra riffs, and this is probably a huge reason why Robin started spiraling further down into his drug abuse and his depression with the band and how he felt about himself.
I went from being like the leader of the band, my nickname was King. Everybody looked at me for everything. What do we do now? To a lot of feelings that I never understood why.
Let's just go over a quick little timeline of when the Infestation World Tour ended and when Dancing Undercover came out. The Infestation World Tour ends on April 30th, 1986. And Dancing Undercover comes out August 9th, 1986. You really have to put that all into perspective. They did a 164-date tour around the whole world, came back, didn't really have time to stop to refresh, and then had to jump right back into the studio and get this thing done on a time constraint. As I said, this didn't really leave them with a lot of time to experiment or try new sounds. They had to put out the same kind of Ratt and roll stuff that people expected, but with that, a lot of people were starting to get maybe bored or a little less interested in it. Now, this is evident just with the sales alone. By every album, sales slowly dropped off. Not to say that the albums didn't sell a lot, but you could see from Out of the Cellar to Dancing Undercover, there's a definite drop from 3 million to 1 million. Aside from Body Talk, Ratt really wasn't breaking any new ground with their sound, but they still were putting out quality music with this, and amazingly they got this thing done by August, and it's a pretty solid album. Ratt had become more of a machine to make money than it was just this rock and roll band that they used to be. Stages were going to be bigger, the lights crazier, more fireworks, bigger, crazier stage show. Ratt decided to pick Cheap Trick to open for them for most of '86, and then eventually they brought in Poison for the rest of the tour for 1987. The tour started on December 4th, 1986, and went till August 30th, 1987, and they did 118 shows. And if you add up what they did with the Infestation tour along with the Dancing Undercover tour, you've got a 282 show touring for about 2 to 3 years. That's just a crazy amount of shows with that little amount of time. Now, midway through the second half of this tour, Poison is dropped off and Queensryche is brought on. But ticket sales really dropped off with that. So eventually they brought Poison back and the ticket sales went back up. Now this yet again is according to Robin, but I guess there was some kind of issues that the band, Steven specifically, was having with Poison. Didn't like the stuff that was happening on stage, was maybe accusing him of stealing his look, his style, the clothes, the dancing, all that stuff. This apparently was part of the reason why Poison was dropped off the tour midway through, but then due to the poor ticket sales, they brought them back. Now at this point too, if you notice, Ratt wasn't really dressing as fancy. They weren't dressing as flamboyantly and flashy. They did a little bit more denim and leather, black and white. It wasn't as it was when they were doing Out of the Cellar and Invasion of Your Privacy. It kind of almost reminded me of Metallica and Justice for All when Cliff Burton died, and they did kind of like they went for a darker look. Musically, obviously, it's not the same, but they did change their look a bit, and they were a little less, I guess, Ratt looking than they used to be. I think the masses really noticed this too, and people were starting to get a little bit more drawn into bands like Poison. Guns N' Roses eventually came out, and people were kind of slowly maybe moving on from Ratt, but Ratt still had a pretty strong following with this album. Also, the name of this tour was the Ratt Poison Tour, which I think is one of the coolest names for any tour you could ever come up with. This album went platinum by 1987, and it had 3 different singles that came with Dance, Body Talk, and Slip of the Lip. Also, the song Body Talk was featured in the film starring Eddie Murphy, The Golden Child, and I've watched that recently. I swear to God, it feels like Ratt is more popular in this movie than any other part in it. They literally show almost the whole entire video. These bikers are sitting around watching this thing, and just, I don't know, it's pretty cool to see Ratt video in a major motion picture.
What are you doing here? Hey! Put your brain, asshole!
I think now it's time that we jump right in and we start talking about this album, which, by the way, I love. Dancing Undercover. Alright, it's time to talk about 1986's Dancing Undercover. And I gotta just tell you, like I said before, I love the album. I think it's probably one of their most consistent, sounding albums. They're, so tight by this point. Everything is just in such, it's just smooth. You can just hear it. They are clicking on all cylinders together. And Robin still has a huge kind of part in this album too. He made a lot of different songs on this one, and you can tell which ones he had a hand in writing. They're a little bit heavier, a little bit faster. There is a lot of blues on this album, but not as bluesy as Reach for the Sky. But it still has the blues, but it also has a little bit of thrash elements, and definitely, that Ratt and roll rock sound. But it starts right off with Dance, which I think is really awesome. There's some really good guitar work happening in that song. And, it's pretty long, too. It's almost 5 minutes. It's over 5 minutes, I believe. And, it just really just cranks. I think it's a really good, fun opener. And then from there you have One Good Lover, which, it's pretty good. It's got pretty good heavy guitars on it. There's some good solo work in it. The lyrics to me are a little corny, but that's to be expected with some of these songs. And that's another really killer tune, I think. but not as good as the next one, Drive Me Crazy. Now this is one of my favorite songs off the album. I think it's really cool because it has this like kind of almost like this loopingness to it, where it's just like you think it's gonna stop with the chorus and then it just keeps going, and then like you get more like leads happening and more like shredding, and it's just really fun. It's just a really great album overall, but like with this songs like this, that's what helps this album so much. And then you have Slip of the Lip. This is just such a great song too. It's a really good, it's got that bluesiness to it, but it's pretty heavy as well. And the lyrics, again, are a little cornball, but you know what? They're also very good in the same sense. You should listen to it sometime. Listen to the words. He's definitely good at writing lyrics at this point too. Like you can hear that, like some of the songs you can tell maybe they were rushed, but the lyrics on this one are kind of hit and miss, but they're still quite good. But my favorite tune comes up next, and that is Body Talk. I love Body Talk. I think it's one of the best Ratt songs around. It's heavy, it is fast, it's just awesome. They've really started to like, hey, let's try some different sounds with this song. And sadly, they never really got back into that. I love how fast the song is. And the lyrics are pretty awesome, too. Like, he just really, like I said, he's hit and miss with this album with his lyrics. But this is the one of those songs where it's like, wow, yeah, no, these are pretty cool lyrics. He's definitely doing some good stuff here. And that would be side A for the vinyl. Now, side B, it starts off with Looking for Love, and this is a song that Robin was really proud of, and I think it's a really cool tune too. This is another one that's pretty heavy, but has a really poppy chorus, but it's fun. It's a fun song, and if you're into, romance and you want to have a little fun thinking about your lady or guy friend, this is a good one for it. Now, like I always say, there's always that one Ratt song on each album that it's kind of like if I have to skip one, I'll skip it. And this is track 7, 7th Avenue. Now, I don't hate it, like I say about all these songs. It's just that it's kind of like, yeah. To me, what it sounds like is like if you were watching an 80s action movie and they go into the bar and, some kind of fight breaks out with the hero, and in the background on the jukebox there's some kind of like bar bluesy jam playing.
Tell you what's sorry. Hey, who the hell are you? Whoa. Very impressive. I don't want to fight you guys. We're out of here. I want him. I want his balls.
So again, it's not a terrible song. It's my least favorite song on the album. And if I'm listening to it on vinyl, obviously I'm not skipping over it. But if I got it on the CD or the streaming, I'm going to jump over it. Not always, but a lot of the time. It doesn't matter. Here's one that I really like a lot. It has like a really cool 80s tone to the guitars. You can hear it. Like just the way it opens up and just the way it feels. You can tell what era this song came from. Now, it's just got a little bluesiness to it, and it's a little heavy. It definitely has some chugginess to it, but overall, it's another one that you can definitely hear that blues influence on. And I think it's pretty good. I think it's a good song. Take a Chance. This was one that Robin didn't personally love. He thought it was half-assed. Myself, I think it's great. I think it has great guitar work in it. I could listen to that song for an extra 2 minutes at the end when there's just such good guitar leads happening. I swear they could have went for an extra 2 minutes with it. That's how good this song really is. Robin didn't like it as much, but you know, it's easy to criticize your own work. But I think it's a great song. I think this really fits in really well with this album. And you know, here we are already at track 10 with Enough Is Enough. And again, this is just another great song. It starts off with a little bit of, you know, just kind of guitar picking, you know, strumming and stuff, just like acoustic. And then it just cranks right in. And I love the bass work on this song in particular. I love the vibe of this song. This is another one that I wish the song was an extra 2 minutes long. It's just so good. Like, the lead at the end is so awesome. It's just oh man, just it really showcases how great these guys have become as musicians. They're just like, they're so tight. Everything on this album is just so tight, but it's not overproduced. The album is very much still got that kind of like, it teeters on underproduced, stripped down sound, but you can tell that it's not the EP or Out of the Cellar. There's definitely a little bit more production going on here, but it is just, I don't know, like sometimes it's my favorite Ratt album because it's so consistent all the way across. Like every single song is consistent with each other. They all fit together. And this is an album, out of all the Ratt albums, when it ends, I literally can hit play and listen to it all the way back through because it just has that feel to it where you could just hit it on repeat. And that's how good this album is. I know a lot of people might say, well, this isn't their best. I know a lot of people might say this is where Ratt started to decline. And I don't agree with declining. I do agree that they didn't really try anything new. They didn't change their sound too much. You can hear Robin's trying to force in some heavier sounds, but with the time constraints of this album, they had to kind of do what they know. Warren DeMartini is a blues player. That is where he started, like with his influences, is people that play the blues, old Depression era blues stuff, and you can hear that on this. But that being said, Robin is still leaving his mark, and there is that heaviness on this as well. Yeah, they aren't as flashy looking now. There's definitely a little bit more of a doom and gloom look to them. Again, this is probably time constraint stuff. They're probably super burned out at this point. I mean, they've put out 3 albums in like 2-ish years. They have toured over 200 tour dates. They're putting in the work, and they're not getting a break. And had they been giving more time to work on this album, I bet you it would have been heavier. I bet you it would have been faster. I bet you there would have been more songs like Body Talk on this. But, you know, it's what the label wanted. They wanted to ride the wave, and Ratt was really popular still. But the problem is, when you're pumping out album after album, people's interest tends to wane a little bit, and they look towards other things that might be kind of reminding them of Ratt, but isn't Ratt. So you had Poison on this tour with them opening. You had Cinderella also opening for them, and both those bands, they're not as good as Ratt by any means musically, but they were more flashy. They probably reminded the fans of, hey, this is what Ratt used to look like. Remember when they were crazy looking with all these clothes and just a lot of energy on stage like this? You know, it takes the toll. Doing drugs and alcohol every day on the road, riding around, never sleeping in your own house, being a millionaire and never being able to actually relax, it takes its toll. It obviously took its toll on the band, and you know, it probably didn't help them to be inspired when writing. But that being said, this album still is incredibly tight, incredibly fast at times, and it is just a really, really solid Ratt album. I'd put it at number 1 if Out of the Cellar didn't exist. I don't know, like I said, it's interchangeable for me. It could be 1, 2, or 3 with, like I called it, part of the Ratt trilogy. So that's about it on this one. I really encourage you guys to check this one out with an open mind. Really listen to it, because I know a lot of people slag on this one because it's like, oh yeah, I don't know, look at the artwork, it's just pictures of them, and it's just black and white, and it's just, you know, kind of like boring looking, but I think it really adds to it. This guy always has to be a part of it. So that being said, pick it up. I got a copy when I was in New York City of a sealed copy of it, and that one's going to stay sealed until I guess I wear out my promotional copy that I have. I always end up with these promo copies of stuff, but I like it. I like to have multiple copies of this. I listen to this a lot. Like I said, when I listen to it all the way through, I sometimes do put it back on, so the grooves definitely get worn out on this guy. I really love this album a lot, and I really hope you guys do too. And that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, you know the drill. Subscribe, like, but the final part is coming out. I don't know how soon, but it's coming out. We're gonna touch base on the final 80s Ratt album, Reach for the Sky, and then we're gonna talk about Detonator, Self-Titled, Infestation, and what happened to the band. And I'm also going to be doing a Robin Crosby tribute memorial type thing at the very end of that too. So stay tuned. Thanks for all your support, and don't forget to rat and roll.